Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Mitch from BD Audio, where we like to dyno amps down under. On tonight's episode, we're up to part 2 of the Recoil amplifier tests. And as you see, we're now going to be testing the monoblocks. First, we have the DII 1000.1, which is rated 550 watts at 4 ohms and 1000 watts at 2 ohms. We then have on the right the DII 1600.1, and that's rated 850 RMS at 4 ohms and 1600 at 2 ohms. So let's get these out of the box and see what comes inside them. And there we go, guys. That is what is in the box. I haven't bothered taking out the contents of each box. I've just pulled it out of one. So first you have some mounting screws. You then have the Allen keys, and again you have some wire ferrules, which is really nice. You also have your pigtails, which are for your high level inputs. Then you have your bass controller wire, which is a telephone cable, which is quite nice. And then you have a very, very small bass knob, as you can see. Very small, but metal case. And you do have a power light and a clip light, which is quite nice, and the dial moves nicely with no clicks. In case you missed the last episode to explain why they give you pigtails, make sure you check out this video up here, and that will explain a little bit more in depth on how to use these in a setup. So again, just like the last amplifiers, these are quite small, as you can see. This one is just about the same size as my hand, and this is a little bit bigger. But the 1000.1 is 200 by 135 by 55 millimeters. We also have the 1600.1, which is 250 by 135 by 55. So it's only a little bit longer. And I'll also show up the equivalents in inches. I have now popped off those metal plates. Underneath, you have very similar styling to the last one. You have a clip light. Now, someone did ask in the last video, is this an input or an output? This is for your output. So this clips the exact same time as your bass knob. You also have your bass frequency, your bass boost, your low pass, your high pass, and your gain. On this side of the amplifier, you have your speaker inputs. Now, I'm not a fan of these in these particular amplifiers because they are too small. You're having to use potentially 10 gauge at best. With the 1000 watt, it's okay to sort of use that. With the 1600 watt, I would have really liked to see an 8 gauge input there. I did have to trim down an 8 gauge wire pretty small to get it in. Also, the fact you had to trim it quite long to get it right in for that angled screw down grub, as well as they are very tight in the middle. So I would have really liked to see an 8 gauge on the monoblocks. For the speakers, it wasn't that bad, but for your monoblocks, I would definitely prefer to see that. You also then have a fan on both models, and then you have your 4 gauge inputs and your 10 gauge remote. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. For the 4 channels, it wasn't a big issue, but for these particular models, you're not able to use one of these. They just do not fit in the hole. And even if I've actually got one where I've trimmed it down a little bit to see if I can fit, the grub screw being on an angle actually doesn't help because it puts no pressure. So it's not able to pin it down correctly. On this side of the amplifier, you have your panel mount RCAs or Tiffany style. So really nice to see that they carried that over to the models. Now you also have your input level, pre-in or speaker in, and you have your auto turn on. So you have your DC, your VOC, or your remote, as well as your bass controller telephone cable port. But I guess there's nothing left to do. Let's strap these up to the dyno and see what kind of power they make. First off, 1000.1. Here we go. Well, we're up to the fun part of the night where we break that factory seal and let's see what's inside. And there we go, guys. That's the inside. Just like the last ones, there's a lot going on in here. There is definitely some components. Let me give you a closer look. I do like the inside of the 1600. Well, what can I say about this? So again, following the last video, I do like the Tiffany style. I do like the casing. I like the hardware. However, I don't like the speaker terminals, being that they are quite small. I would have really liked to see an 8 gauge. And also, they didn't quite make rated. Now, the fact that they were just under is pretty good, and I'm going to pass that. The fact of how much more power they made on dynamic was crazy. It's almost like this amp just clips a little bit too soon. But as you've seen with the dynamic scores, or the full sends, they definitely smash those out the park. So I definitely think for you, your hard-hitting music, these are going to be beneficial for you. And also, just make sure that you go onto that Recoil Australia website and check out these new prices. I'm sure they won't last for too long. Grab yourself one of these amplifiers, whack it in your car, and have some fun with your friends. And as always, guys, if you like what we do on this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications. Thanks for tuning in. This is Mitch from BD Audio, where we like to dyno amps down under. I'm tuning out. See ya!